Equally important for all professionals, it assumes even greater importance when it comes to our industry that witnesses a greater churn of talent. And you would agree with me when I say that any wealth manager who enjoys a greater trust and confidence of his or her clients is likely to be more successful. To get these facts out for us and to help us create and strengthen our brand image, I will now welcome R. Sridhar. Sridhar is the founder and CEO of Ideas RS, and he helps companies unleash their innovation potential. Sridhar, over to you now.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts with you. The first thing I want to do here is to bust the myth that we can actually build a reputation for ourselves, right? My experience is that our reputation is in the mind of the beholder, okay? And we don't build our reputation, he does. So how does he build our reputation in his mind is our challenge. So he builds it based on what he sees, he builds it based on what he hears, what he thinks, what he feels, and experiences, okay? Those are the building blocks he uses for building our reputation in his mind. So the best we can do is really manage the inputs into his mind, which is what are we saying, what are we doing, how are we creating experiences that can create a wow in his mind, and so on and so forth. So we can at best influence what he sees, as I said. It is he uses all these inputs to build a reputation for us in his mind. So what I'm going to share with you is how we might influence these people, okay, and much of it will depend on my personal experience as a person who is trying to build a practice, and I've been doing this for the last 15 years, and before that when I used to be part of Ogilvy and Mather. So part of the stories are from my Ogilvy and Mather days, and part of the stories are when I've been on my own since the last 15 years. So in my early days, when I became a manager of one of the Ogilvy and Mather offices, which was in Bangalore, I thought getting visible would be a very important thing, and it will help me a lot, okay? So the first opportunity I had to go and speak at a Rotary event, I took that opportunity and went and spoke at a Rotary event. Then within the next 2 weeks, suddenly I started getting calls from all the Rotaries in Bangalore, various Rotary guys in Bangalore saying, can you come and speak to us, and so on. And of course I was very thrilled because in my mind I thought I was a sought after speaker. Then I met a very senior Rotary person over lunch one day, and I told him that I just can't figure out this because so many of these Rotary clubs are calling me regularly to come and speak to them. He said, I don't want you to feel bad. Let me tell you something very interesting. It's a secret which we don't normally share with people. Every Rotary club has called what is called as a Stepney list. The Stepney list is that when the guest speaker doesn't come, they need to actually go and locate somebody else as a Stepney to come and actually speak. And they would like people who can speak reasonably well and are willing and able to help. So apparently my name was right on top of the Stepney list, and that was the secret of getting so many calls from so many Rotaries to come and speak to them. So what it actually occurred to me is that I was going and speaking, not mindful of the reputation I was actually building. I was just thinking that I must get visibility, I must go and speak to the Rotary Club. And every time I saw a senior person in the Rotary Club, my mind was immediately saying, oh, maybe, this guy can become a prospective client, and so on and so forth. The first time I paid attention to reputation per se is when something really shocking happened to me in my Ogilvy and Mather days. I used to be a vice president and head of Ogilvy and Mather Bangalore, and we had a very large client. We were handling a very important brand for them, and the brand was not doing well. And part of my work was to meet clients most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, on a no agenda meeting basis. Because in this no agenda meeting, it was possible for us to discuss a variety of issues which concerned the work we do, plus also to understand the overall context of their business. So I knew that the brand was not doing well, and I had actually carefully thought out some very useful recommendations. So I went to the client with these recommendations, and I was with the CEO, and I shared those recommendations with him. He was very nice, very polite, gave me coffee, etc., but he wouldn't really pay attention to what I was saying. And when I came back, I thought he actually had fobbed me off. Okay? He was nice. There was nothing in his demeanor which made me feel that he was not listening to me, but then he fobbed me off. So that is okay. The next week, my managing director from Bombay landed up in Bangalore, and part of my routine was to go with him to see senior clients, which I think all of us do in our various professions. So we went to this client that day, and on the way, my managing director said, so what's the status of this business? What are the burning issues and so on? So forth. I quickly did a debrief and said, this is what happened last week. This is what I told him. And he said, yeah, that makes sense to me. I think that's the right thing to do. So when we went for the meeting, the subject really turned around to the brand which was in trouble. And my managing director told him exactly, word for word, the same thing that I told him the previous week. Now I was expecting some fireworks and, heated debate and all that. Nothing like that happened. Instead, my client said, you know why? Every time you come, it's like a breath of fresh air, right? You bring so much new, interesting perspectives. That's why I'm always looking forward to your visit. And I was shocked. When I came back, I was actually livid, but I could do nothing about it. But then it told me something about what was happening. Okay, and I'll come to that in a little later. Within the next 1 year or so, there was another major client in Bangalore who told my managing director that, is it all right if we don't have Sridhar in our business? Yeah? And he said, don't tell him, I don't want him to feel bad, but I think he lacks social grace. And then he really doesn't add value to our business. So my managing director was also my mentor, so he said, don't worry, there are enough things for you to do, but for the time being, we are moving you off from that business. I was the head of the business, head of that office. That was one of the largest accounts that we had, and I had no role to play, and you can imagine what it could mean. So the next event that happened to me, which brought in this whole focus on reputation, was when I set up business on my own. I set up this thing called Ideas RS. I loved the name, and every time I mentioned my company's name, there was a discussion on what is Ideas and what is RS. RS doesn't mean rupees, and when I told them it is R. Sridhar, they liked it, or somebody said it's like Toys R Us, and it was like engaging the prospect in a nice discussion. So I was wanting to meet somebody very senior in Times of India who was a friend of mine. So I called the secretary and said, I would like to meet so-and-so, so-and-so. And she said, who do I say is calling for him? So I said, Sridhar. Sridhar from Ideas RS. Ideas what? Ideas RS. Ideas? I never heard this. Can you spell it for me? I said, okay, here is how it's spelled, and I spelled it. And she still didn't get it. Okay, and she was playing games with this, ideas that. So fully exasperated, I said, why don't you just tell him, Sridhar formerly from Ogilvy and Mather. And she said, why didn't you say that before? Right? So here I was, so thrilled with my name, and I was setting up, and I was wanting to see people, and this was like a big, poke in the balloon, right? So finally, it occurred to me that these are the things that happened to me in the 3 instances that I narrated to you. In the first instance, the MD of my client company thought of me as a local rep, not a vice president. And my boss, who was coming from Bombay, was the expert, right? So the local rep is generally the fixer. He fixes appointments, fetches people from airports, and this, that, etc. So that was one. In the second instance, the client thought of me as one who neither added value nor was seen as good company. Okay, he didn't add value in the meeting. Now is he actually adding value by being a nice, friendly person who had the social grace to talk about wines and this, that, etc. I had none of that. And in the third instance, my identity was so closely linked to Ogilvy, And without the Ogilvy attachment, I was a nobody. So here is a very interesting way in which I realized the importance of having your own reputation. Okay? In the first instance, it really provoked me to say, and I have no hesitation in saying this, I said to myself that there must be something for which clients will seek me out, where they cannot talk to my MD, they cannot talk to anybody else in the organization because only I know that best. Then I was like a passionate madman. I mastered everything there is to know about the direct marketing business. Every opportunity I got, I read about it. I saw people, I pitched for business. I built that business. And there came a time where the very same client who fought me off and the very same client who said, this guy lacks social grace, they asked for me because they wanted direct marketing input. So it told me that you had to be an expert, you be sought after in some context or the other, right? So during the period I was in Ogilvy and Mather Direct, I attended a heads of office meeting. It was in New York. And then there was one session, I don't know if you heard the name David Meister. Some of you might have heard of him. David Meister is the author of a book called Trusted Advisors, one of the few books which are really sound in terms of how advisors must conduct themselves. So he made an interesting comment during the session. He says, clients don't care as to how much you know, as long as they don't know how much you care. Let me say that again. Clients don't care how much you know, as long as they don't know how much you care. So this actually sort of hit me here. He said, listen, all the things that I am saying and doing about direct marketing is of absolutely no use if it's not going to solve problems for my clients or help him build his business. So unless I have the relevance bridge built to the customer or the client, my knowledge is useless. It's of no consequence, right? So that was a very important thing that I learned there. The next thing that happened, right, I attended a very interesting training program on advanced consulting skills. Okay? It was run by a company called Design Learning. There was a guy who wrote a book called Flawless Consulting. Okay? And this company was run by that people. So on the very first day, the very first session, the faculty who came in, he gave us an exercise. Okay, it is a deceptively simple exercise. He said, I want you to do 3 things for me. Okay? First is, describe what is your expertise. Okay? Describe what is your expertise. Second, he said, what's in it for me as a client? Okay? And the third, he said, how will you make it happen for me? What is your expertise? What's in it for me? How will you make it happen for me? So there were 10 of us, and all of us were either directors, CEOs, heads of businesses, fairly senior people, right? And from a variety of countries, and all of us said, this is easy, right? So I wrote my first draft and went to this guy. And my first draft read like this. What is my expertise? Marketing communications. Of course, I was in marketing communication. What's in it for you? Helps you communicate powerfully. How will you make it happen? Through various communication vehicles. And I thought it was okay. I even thought it was good. He tore it into bits. And he said, go back and write it again. It was like he was playing headmaster and I was a kid. And he would have no nonsense. He didn't spare anyone. He said, go back, go back. And he said, I'm not stepping out of this room till you guys get it. At 7 p.m. in the evening, I got my first draft, which was reasonably okay. And let me read what I wrote at that time. So what is your expertise? I said, my expertise is simplifying, clarifying, and making your thinking process enjoyable. That's my expertise. I simplify things for you, I clarify things for you, and I make your thinking process enjoyable. For most of us, thinking is quite tough, isn't it? So make your thinking process enjoyable. So he said, yeah, okay, it looks like it's more or less there. So grudgingly he said that. He said, what about the next one? What's in it for me? And I said, you find new ways to solve your problems and make better decisions. Right? This is what most senior management wants to do, is that right? They want new ideas, new ways to solve problems, and they want to make better decisions, better considered decisions. And thinking is so integral and critical to that process. So how will you make it happen? I said, I'll make it happen by working one-on-one with you on real-life business challenges. I'll work as a consultant and a coach. So then this faculty said, you can now go home and have dinner. You earned it. So that incident actually made me so client-focused. And in terms of clarity that it brought in, it helped me. It changed my conversations with clients. Okay, I got to run faster now, is it? I thought I had 30 minutes, already done 20. Okay, I'll run a little faster, okay? So when I worked with clients, I could help them arrive at the real issue much faster than before. I also noticed a shift in the way clients spoke to me or talked to me about their various issues. So here is an example once. I received a phone call from one of the FMCG managers, the brand manager, who called me and said that, I'm working on an important project. My boss has asked me to speak to you. And he said that you'll help me get clarity in my work. It's like a certificate that was given to me. First thing is to say that this, you speak to him, this is what you'll get. That was clear. And the fact that they trusted me enough to think that this guy is going to be helpful, he is like our friend, and therefore he is approachable all the time. So that was a very nice thing that happened. Okay? So obviously I was doing some things right, and then about 8 years ago, I attended an Ogilvy and Mather alumni party, okay, where I worked. So over dinner, I had a guy who was sitting next to me, and he said, what do you do for a living? He didn't know me, right? And he was a stranger because he worked in Ogilvy much later. So I said, I'm an innovation coach. So he said, oh, that's very interesting, but what exactly do you do, right? So what do you do is a deceptively simple question. The final answers I had for that are very many things, but one of the things that I said, I am like a broom that removes the cobwebs in your mind. Okay, when you use a metaphor like this, people know exactly what you're talking about. In my LinkedIn profile, it's very clearly saying that I am somebody who removes the cobwebs in your mind. And the proof that this is working is that many clients have used it when they introduce me to their audience. That seemed to have stuck and struck home somewhere or the other. Okay? But life goes on and nothing stands still. So I had a next challenge, and one day I said, why am I doing all this? Right? So the answer was not making money, because somebody said making money to business is like breathing to human being. I mean, it is necessary to stay in business only through profits. You can be alive only if you're breathing, right? So that actually gave me an insight into what I really want to do. What I really wanted to do is to help people think differently and make life better, okay? So this is the way I saw that, and this has been going on for a long time. I've created a toolkit for thinking. I have an iPhone app called Tickle Me Think, and then I ran a 13-episode CNBC series on the power of ideas, etc., and so on and so forth. So I also write a blog in my website about all of these kind of stuff. So one of the questions you might ask me is saying that all this is fine, you have a series of activities, how do you know this is working for you? Now, one of the things that I found out is in my LinkedIn profile, there are several people who wrote in their recommendations. And I'm going to very quickly run through some of the key phrases they've used. One of the phrases is unlocks creativity, provokes thinking, challenges status quo, pushes boundaries, curious, childlike, gets into client shoes, affable, simple, friendly, pleasant, humble, calm, knowledgeable, insights, maturity, grounded, practical, helpful, articulate, persuasive. Interestingly, I don't use any of these descriptors to describe myself. This is what the client is saying. This goes back to the point that I said that they build the repetition in their minds based on what they see you doing, what they see you saying, what they see you talking about, and what they see you in terms of the experience that you create for them. So I'm going to finish by saying, if you want to actually see the way you want to build repetition in other people's minds, and you want to maintain it, the first thing that you need to do is to start out by figuring what you want to be seen as and known as. That's absolutely the very first step. If you haven't defined it, you're not getting anywhere with that. The second thing is, are you comfortable with that statement? Will that make you feel nice? Will you proudly say that to your wife, your father-in-law, your kid, right? Then if you're comfortable, then you're okay. And the last thing is, then you will have to decide in terms of what will you say and do consistently time after time to carry this message forward, right? It's not a message. It's about the way you are, and you have to feel comfortably, and people take the messages out of that, okay? So this is what reputation building and reputation management is all about, and quite frankly, there's nothing more to it, okay? However, acting on your purpose, consistently staying focused and recalibrating yourself regularly is absolutely necessary for you to do that. But we don't have a choice if we are saying that I want to earn the reputation and also retain it. I do hope that what I shared with you is of some relevance to what you're doing, and there are things that you can actually take back and work on, and they're not so complicated. It only means that you have to consistently do that time and time again, and when you feel bored, you know, take a break and go back and do it all over again. Wish you good luck and all the best. Right.
So, questions from the audience? Now, Sridhar, you know, the most profound thing that I found in your presentation was that reputation is not something that we create or build. It is what exists in the other person's minds. Now, wouldn't that require us to do a reality check often on what others think of us? You had 3 insightful moments which you shared with us. Your clients said something about you which kind of helped you understand what they thought about you. What could, in your experience, be the process of discovery for other people?
Okay, the first thing is that you must suffer from what is called as divine discontent. Something about the way people perceive you must bother you. Like that Rotarian who said, you know, you're part of the Stepney list. Can you imagine how hurt you would have felt? Right? If you didn't feel that, we won't do anything about it. So there must be something about the way people think about you, talk about you, that must bother you to say, hey, I must set this right. So I think that's the most important starting point. If that is not there, any amount of saying, brand you, branding as a person, all of that will be of no avail if you've not actually got that. The next thing very clearly is to understand what you want to be seen as and known as, and you must be comfortable. Trying to be somebody who you are not is disastrous. Don't ever try it, right? You have to be yourself. You have a huge amount of strength. There are a lot of things that you can leverage to help other people do and get their results. You got to really find it out. If you don't know how to find it out, speak to people who you trust and who can help you ask the right questions, or ask you the right questions and listen to what you're saying. Put it together. It's not an easy process, right? You have to be at it. And one day when you say, aha, you got it. And then it's like crafting it, chiseling it further, making it better, etc. In my mind, if you start the process, it can easily take about 3 to 6 months before you get there. But you can actually start working on it. Okay? There is no straight and easy answer to this. And my strong recommendation is don't read books on branding yourself and don't waste your time. Because they all, it's like saying that, you know, what worked for product brands, which are inanimate, to people is not very easy, right? And even those people are wanting to treat brands as living people, and they give it a persona and so on and so forth, right? So the thing is to don't worry about branding per se, worry about what you wish to stand for, right? And what is your purpose? Okay? Long answer to a short question.
Somewhat related to that is that, you know, a lot of people in corporate life seek protection under the corporate reputation. You were working for Ogilvy and Mather, and Ogilvy and Mather has always been a very well-regarded advertising agency. And at any point of time, you would have had a few celebrated, creative folks working with you. Now, very often I've seen that people take protection under the thing and try to just get by, rather than contribute anything of their own. So, at what stage should they start thinking about their own individual reputations and adding value to their own careers rather than relying purely on the corporate brand?
You know, this is a kind of a tricky question. But my answer is that don't worry about your reputation per se. Think in terms of what are you bringing to the table. When you bring table that is relevant and valuable to the client, your reputation will soar. Clients will seek you out. The mistake people make is saying, do I need to build a reputation for myself over and above the reputation of the organization? That's not necessary. If you believe in the organization's vision, mission, and values and so on, well within that framework, you can find a small niche for yourself. And I can promise you, as long as you're relevant, people seek you out. As long as you're valuable and you actually make sense, people seek you out. The moment you start saying, you know, we did that in 1974 and all that, you're gone. Nobody wants to back up on the past. Okay. Right, thank you.
May I now request Arshendu, the president of Franklin Templeton, to give a small token of appreciation to Sridhar. Sridhar. So, folks, we are come to the last session of the day, and we've saved the best for the last. So, getting distributors and AMCs to work together is a given. They're two sides of the same coin, right? Both of them exist to serve the same set of people, which is the investors. This subject has been of profound interest to me. In the good old days, there used to be a lot of give and take because both AMCs and distributors were trying to understand the business together. And then somewhere down the line, the focus moved to purely a, monetary arrangement. And then that kind of other things sort of took a backseat. So what can really AMCs do to work with distributors? How can AMCs add value? What can distributors do which makes it a win-win situation, which leaves something on the table for AMCs to take home? So this is what I thought we should be discussing in a forum like this. So may I now invite Rajiv to come to the stage. Rajiv is going to lead and moderate the discussion. Rajiv is the Vice Chairman and MD of Bajaj Capital, a veteran in the business. And Rajiv, please take a seat. I'd now invite Nimesh to join him. Nimesh is the MD and CEO of Prudential ICICI Prudential, and he joined ICICI Prudential in 2007 and done a remarkable job on ICICI. So thank you, Nimesh. And now may I invite Sandeep Sikka. Sandeep Sikka is the CEO of Reliance AMC, and Sandeep is also the chairman of the industry body, AMFI. Now, Neeraj, will you please come on the stage? Neeraj, of course, has founded NJ India, which has created a unique model, a unique platform in the country, and truly a pioneer of sorts. And now, may I invite Pratik to... Pratik is the President, Products and Services for RBS. So, Pratik, he represents the banking community today. Come. And Arshendu, can I invite you? Arshendu is the President of Franklin Templeton, and before taking on the India assignment, Arshendu was responsible for Eastern and Central Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. So hope you can contribute something from the lessons that you've seen in those markets. So over to you. All of you are kitted, but I think in case some of you, okay. And I'll get another.
We'll get the mic. So thank you very much, Prem, for this very generous introduction. And as you see, friends, we have a star-studded panel. This is, this looks like the late night show of a movie. So you have all stayed back, you have taken your extra doses of coffee and stayed back for late night show. So what we can assure you, we have a star-studded team here, and we assure you paisa vasool from this show. And I have, taken commitment from all my friends here that the doors are locked, and in the next 45 minutes, till all the industry issues are resolved, we will not leave the room. So my flight, Indigo, I've told them to keep the plane on hold till we, finish and resolve all the matters. But friends, that was on a lighter note. Thank you once again, Prem. It's a very interesting topic. I was dissecting the statement and the topic you gave us, forging a deep relationship, deepening the relationship, mutually beneficial. And, last 48 hours, as I have been thinking about this topic, I've been reminiscing how, so there are last 2 or 3 months or last 6 months or last 2 years, there have been some good memories and some not so good memories. There's a lot of baggage in mind, when it comes to our relationship of distribution community with AMCs. But if we go back, I have been reminiscing in the last couple of days while preparing for this, the last 25 years of relationship. I've been in this industry for 25 years, and I still remember the day, Harshendu, when Vijay Advani with his briefcase walked into our office and he said, I want to set up a mutual funds here. So I'm sure all of you, some leading top distributors, bankers, IFAs are present here. All of you have such stories where, right from day one, we have been involved in launch of Reliance. We've been involved in Reliance of ICICI Pru, the launch. And each one of us has great memories. Our own personal development, self-development, training, we owe a lot to mutual funds. So this is a very integral and important part of our life. Friends, we also know that what is the opportunity that is ahead of us. We hear of McKinsey reports, FII and CRISIL are launching their distribution industry reports. So I have some preview. This is happening on 23rd. There is a 30 lakh crore vision. In the next 5 years, there's a potential for this industry to grow at 20% CAGR and go to 30 lakh crores. So just imagine the kind of brokerage. This year, the figures are not yet out, but the brokerage of all distributors combined is expected to go up from 2,800 to 5,000 crores. So what I would like is, we all know these reports and these high-level things and the opportunity. We all also know the issues which are, tearing us apart. So let us not get too tactical and let us not get too high level. Let us talk about, the key things, the topic that has been given to us, how to forge, deepen this mutually beneficial relationship. So, Harshendu, you sent me a very nice note. So I would like to start with you. You spoke about strings that tie us together. So if you can probably kick off on that note.
So, the way I see the whole investment world, I think it's one big ecosystem, and that consists of several stakeholders. But really, from a manufacturer perspective, if you look at manufacturing, and that's the AMC side of things, or you look at all of our distribution partners, whether they be a small IFA in a small town or some large national distributors and banks, and the end consumer, I think we form one big ecosystem, and the ecosystem can only thrive if all three stakeholders do well. And so that was the point that I was making, that it has to be a win-win for all of the three stakeholders really to do well. There's another important stakeholder we have to keep in mind, and this is the regulator. And what what we are finding is that as long as you keep the consumer happy and do everything in the interest of the consumer, more or less you have the regulator on your side as well. So for the time being, keeping the regulatory issues aside, I think unless we start seeing this whole ecosystem as one and see that every component of the ecosystem has to thrive, I don't think we will do well in the long run. And so that's my basic premise on this.
Absolutely, absolutely. Neeraj bhai, there has been a lot, on our mind recently, and this very hunky-dory relationship, like a good marriage. Somewhere there is, and let's acknowledge it, and this this forum has given us the platform to talk about it openly. That there is some stress in this relationship. So, what do you think are the issues that are tearing us apart, and how do you think we can bring it all together again?
Yeah, I think as Harshendu rightly said, that all the stakeholders needs to work collectively. So it's particularly when we talk about an AMC and a distributor, it is a partnership.
Yeah.
When it is a partnership, the problems are collective. Whether it is a AMC issue, then it is not only AMC's issue, but it is also distributor's issue. And when it is a distributor's issue, I think it is also an AMC issue. I think that is the spirit with which, if we move forward or if we go ahead, then we will not see us on different sides. So I think we have to be on the same side. What has happened probably in the recent past or maybe in the last couple of years, a lot of regulatory changes have taken place, and many of these changes have impacted the revenues of distributors. And somewhere the communication which should have happened has not happened with the the industry body and the distributors collectively. And on a one-on-one basis, still the relationship with the distributors and AMCs continues to be very, very good. But when it comes to a joint kind of a involvement or a representation, probably somewhere there is some sort of a lack of trust in each other that has happened. That's my personal gut feeling. I may be wrong also, but somewhere in the mind of many of the CEOs as well as in the minds of many of the distributors, they are not on the same side. That is what is being felt. And I think if there is a open communication which takes place, then this can get easily sorted out, because ultimately both of us have a similar revenue line and both objective are aligned. I mean, both the parties grow together. That's what I understand. And NJ also, we have grown with the AMCs together for the last more than 20 years now.
Absolutely.
So that's
So Sandeep, you have an additional you've been on, you've grown through this system, and you're leading one of the largest AMCs, and you also are representing the industry, and you have probably the closest ear to the expectations of the regulator. So what, according to you, is, regulator expecting from us? That would be important to know, and then your take on the, entire debate.
Thanks, Rajiv. I think let me first get into the topic of discussion, the forging the relationship of distributor and AMC. For me personally, the relationship between a distributor and the AMC is of a relationship of husband and wife. You don't have to plan and sit down together to make a strategy how to forge ahead. In any relationship, in a husband-wife relationship, there are enough ups and downs, There are enough discussions, debates, but I think we all enjoy the journey together.
Yes.
So, and that is exactly what this industry is all about. So many times, I think I just heard my earlier speakers, talking about multiple stakeholders. My take on this is a little different. I think when we talk of stakeholders in the industry, we talk of, we hear distributors, AMCs, regulators and investors. We need to cut down one level. AMCs and distributors are one, firstly. So it is, you need to start saying AMCs, distributors, investors and regulators. That's the way you have to see it. Because ultimately, both of them, the AMC and distributor is surviving because of the investor and because of the regulatory environment which has been created by the regulator. So firstly, this debate of stress, these relationships and all, I actually do not take this, I feel this is a part of a journey which each one of us go through, and I think any one of us would be lying if he were to say that sitting on the panel or anyone who's been married for more than 5 years, that he never had a fight with his wife or husband,
Yeah.
So it's exactly, so all of us, so we need to understand there's a big difference between courtship and marriage. And all of us as distributors and AMCs, we are married to each other. So there's no question, and in India, one thing is very clear, we don't live in West, where you have a courtship with somebody, you marry someone and again you remarry again someone. Once you're married, you're married. So I think let's get this thing right, that I think all of us are married together.
Yeah.
So that's first.
Yes.
I think secondly, coming to the regulator, your question. I think broadly from the regulator point of view, and I think your earlier question to Neeraj Bhai also, a lot of things have been happening and regulator expects the industry to evolve. Many times changes will happen, and in any industry, any economy, and you will see when the industry grows, there will be new sets of rules which will come in. And normally what happens is, in short term, when we look at it, this disturbance causes a little bit of stress. But in long run, if you were to see, maybe 10 years later, and when you mentioned, I think I'm also very eagerly waiting for your report when the industry touches 30 lakh crores. See, when we'll go from this 12 lakh crores to 30 lakh crores, so effectively you touched about today we have a brokerage of 5,000 crores, this 5,000 means into 3 times more, 15,000 crores. I think we will not even worry about all these discussions which are happening today. So I think my point is very simple. We have to become adaptable. We have to remember that in the long run, in which way the industry is going. And if the industry is going, the pie is increasing. We'll have to live with the fact nothing is going to be static, things are going to be dynamic, and how well we respond to these changes is going to be critical. The regulator expects each AMC and all mature distributors to keep respecting and accepting some of the changes, and they are open to look at, open to feedback, which they have demonstrated in past. And I would say from a long-term point of view, the present regulator is more open to feedback than anyone before.
Right, absolutely. Great thoughts, Sandeep. Nimesh, you are, I always look at you as a outside-in person. You are not a born fund manager. You have adapted to this new pond very well, but you are, you've come from a different ecosystem. So from your eyes, how have you seen, the industry, evolve in the last 8 years, and especially the topic, in question, this relationship between, AMCs and distributors, and how we can forge, a strong partnership to take the industry forward?
Maybe now I'm 8 years old in the industry. My whole thing is that whenever there are changes, I feel there is a huge amount of noise, whether it was August 2009 or anywhere. But somewhere what is tried to do is that regulators try to align the interest of the producer, the distributor and the investor. That's what is being, that's what the attempt is. So frankly, my own view on the changes and all, I don't, there have been huge amount of changes. The way we operate, everything has changed. But I've told in my company that don't come and tell me that what are the changes and what are the challenges in that. Changes will be there. You have to see how you adapt to the changes, and there are 44 guys in the market, and you need to be adapted much better than anybody else adapts. That's all I see. I think the market is, we are blessed to be in a country like India. Any business, forget mutual funds, banking, any financial service, non-financial business, we are blessed to be in a country like India where the market is infinite. As long as we use technology and decrease the operating cost per unit such that the marginal transaction you can take profitably, we'll do well as an industry. I feel the industry is a very pure industry. I'm very happy when I go home every day. I know the exact AUM I have. I know the exact AUM money that we have made. I know the exact how well we have done for the final investor. Why this industry will grow, while I don't know the numbers, I believe any product which is pure for the final customer will grow. So what excites me, my product, I know that it can hit a school teacher, retired school teacher in Guwahati, and he should not have a bad experience if he stays for 3 to 5 years in the product. That's the only paradigm I have kept for my product, guys. That you need to, any product of AMC, and which other industry can today say that my product can hit a school teacher in Guwahati and he won't be adversely affected if he stays in that for 3 to 5 years. So if the product is pure, that industry is set to grow. So I don't think banking, look at I come from banking industry. We are doing now, I feel corporate credit is completely moving towards, if it is a rated client, he will get, banking works for 3 to 5% NII. Some bank gets an NII of 3.5%, some bank gets an NII of 4.5%. We are doing the same product with the NII of 1.5 and 1.6 and the credit funds. Absolutely. So this disintermediation that is happening, it is hurting the banks today when you are talking about the credit funds. Yeah. So if this industry has been able to control its operating costs very well, and since the operating cost is controlled, the product is good for the final investor, regulation is up there, this industry will grow. So I am only looking at the volume. So if the volume is coming in, margin is anyway there.
Excellent. Now, very well put. Prateek, you have a very unique perspective because you have worked in an AMC for 5 years and now you are in distribution for last 4. So please tell us how grass looks on the other side.
The grass always looks green on the other side. So if you keep tracking where I move next and don't join that part of the industry. So when I used to be on the asset management side, so the way I look at it is slightly different. It's the industry has been this industry has been an industry of excesses. Truly in the 2000s, in the mid 2000s, there were significant excesses from the distribution. When you get feedback from clients like we heard today, where there is very little trust in the distribution partners they've met. There is, they don't really trust the financial advisor. The bank RMs keep on changing from time to time. It's not that this, on the distribution side, we've not had our own challenges, we've not had our own issues of mis-selling. So that's a background from which we came in. And then you had 2009 and you've had subsequent changes where the pendulum is swinging now to the other end. So you've moved from one side of excesses of mis-selling where you were trying to get few things sorted out and oriented. And now you're getting to the other side, where distributors are suddenly finding that it's not really viable because of the type of changes. Their whole business models keep changing from month to month. And how do you really plan for a much longer period? But I would tend to agree with what Nimesh says. The biggest plus point of this industry is that there's complete transparency. It's extremely well regulated. And finally, what you get is what you see. And again, this has also evolved over the last 15, 20 years. Finally, we all need to realize this, that, while you may have had unit trusts which had schemes much earlier in time, the real AUM in this industry has only been in the last 15 odd years. While we may keep adding that in the next 5 years, what we did in the last 15 years, it's a very, very young industry. So we will go through some of these challenges of growing up at a pace which was not expected. So I guess all of us would need to, that's why, communicate much better. I do, again in the earlier morning session, Nilesh made a very, very relevant point that while on the manufacturing side, you've had a body which has been able to represent to the regulators and talk to them about, the challenges and be one body. I guess what has been missing on the distribution side is really that, where you've had one body who's been able to communicate the distributor side of the story, and how is it that distribution is actually making efforts, and it's not just a few fishes which can dirty a pond, but there are there are distributors with very ethical processes who have clients' interest at the top of their mind. Their due diligence processes are very strong. But you need to be able to communicate some of these things in a lot more effective way to the regulators. I mean, I do agree. The regulator always is thinking in the interest of the client, and I just guess on the distribution side, they should be able to tell their story a lot more effectively.
So what I am, hearing now that we have, the first set of views from all the panelists, that communication gap is coming up as an area that earlier there was, and absolutely right, there was no one voice of distribution. Now there are 3 or 4 strong bodies representing IFAs, national distributors, banks that have come up, and there is a, with AMFI, which is the Industry Association of Mutual Funds, there are 3 or 4 common set of voices which are going, and communication, I would say the bridge is not yet established, but it is at initial stages. So you can say a kacha bridge is there, not a pakka bridge. How do we fortify this communication bridge would be very important in helping us take care of all these immediate challenges. Since we are a very cozy, this is a late night movie and a very cozy session at this stage, I would want to know from the audience, what are the one or two things which are dominating challenges that are dominating your mind right now, as far as your business is concerned. And I don't, I would request not any statements or long observations, just very crisply if you tell us one challenge, biggest challenge which you are facing right now. Yes, ma'am, at the back.
Just 2 words, service tax.
Service tax, yes. Yes, ma'am. That was very crisp. Thank you. Yes, sir.
How to manage initial cost for acquiring business?
Okay. Cost of client acquisition, absolutely. Very, very important point. So whether you're an IFA or you're a national player or a bank, this is a very big challenge for all of us. What else? Yes, sir.
Direct plan.
So, yeah, direct plan, absolutely. So we can debate that. What else? Anything else? Okay, so let's begin with this set, and So like I said, we should not get stuck in very tactical issues, but service tax is a very, very important challenge because at an estimate about 5,000 crores would be the brokerage given out to distributors, and on that 14% service tax comes to 700 crores. And we have been speaking to different distributors. My estimation is that the total combined profitability of all distributors in India put together, banks, national distributors, regional, IFAs combined, is about 500 crores. So 700 crore service tax impact, and the initial take has been that it should be borne by the distributor. So Sandeep, what would be your, how can we, this is a immediate and clear and present danger for the industry. How should we go about it?
As you are aware, there are a lot of industry bodies, distribution associations have reached out to AMFI, and based on that request, AMFI has also talked to SEBI on it. There's a dialogue which is on with SEBI. Yes, I think again it will be very premature for me to give a comment which way it will go, but very clearly one thing which has, since you said it's a late night movie,
yes.
So I think one thing I can share with you, with the last meeting with the SEBI regulator, they also updated, they have got a service tax notice. So they said that anything to do with the government taxes and all, I think you should remember these are two different things there. So it's not, everything is not as simple as it looks like. So I think very clearly, I understand and appreciate the fact that it's a very burning issue, and industry body has taken it very seriously. There have been n number of debates which are happening, and quite a number of representations which have gone to SEBI. So I think I like to wait before making a comment. But I think, as I mentioned in my earlier part, what I said, ultimately we are all in a relationship with a husband, wife. We share the joy and happiness together. So I think we should be prepared, in the journey, where you mentioned the brokerage went up from 2,800 to 5,000 crores. I think that's the way you have to see. I think the industry pie will keep increasing. We have to keep working on pie tax, like they say. Taxes is something which I think nobody can plan, you never know. A lot of companies, a lot of AMCs which are right now in MAT or in losses, they will move to 25% tax because of this budget. So I think again about taxes, very difficult to comment which way the taxes will go, but I think industry body is taking it up with the regulator. Absolutely. And I think the moment we have something to share, I think we'll come back to all the associations who are working with us closely.
Yeah. And I must say that there is this channel of communication. This may not be the right platform to go, discuss beyond this here, but AMFI and other industry associations are very openly discussing these issues. So if and when there is a need, there could be a case for a joint representation, etc. So it's a very important issue, sir.
But I think, Rajiv, I would also request, I think all the associations, you should go and reach out to SEBI once, SEBI. I think you should, because it's very important. Well, AMFI has taken it up on behalf of all the distributors, but I think it's important, 5 to 7 or key distributor associations should seek time from SEBI and also share, because you play a very integral role in the growth of the mutual fund industry. So they should be made aware. So I think I would request you to seek an appointment with the regulators and take about 5-6 associations with you.
We could get to that. No, that's a great suggestion. Cost of client acquisition, absolutely a great point, contributed by you. Harshendu, this is also linked to the change of pricing model, because I remember my colleague and CEO, Mr. Anil Chopra, he made this observation 2009, which I found very intuitive, saying that when the entry load went, he says the entry load was something which was recovered from investor to educate investors. So in a way, I can give you Bajaj Capital example. We used to do 200 investor awareness camps, which we had to cut down to 100 because entry load went. So this upfront, while it has its, the other side of the coin, but one of the advantages of any form of upfront structure, whether it is 2-3 years trail upfronted in the current regime till 2 months ago, or the entry load, the advantage of that is that helps fund customer acquisition, because that is very expensive in this business. So what would be your, observations, comments because distributors, because of the suddenness of this change, none of us, I think, sitting in this room would debate that this aligns the interest of all the stakeholders, and this is good for long term. And we are seeing, that large AMCs, how their profitability has grown because they are on an annuity model. So we understand the benefits of the annuity model. Prashant Jain gave us a beautiful presentation this morning demonstrating the benefits of annuity model. But the transition has been so sudden that it has taken us by surprise, and it has burnt holes in many of our pockets, and especially customer acquisition, especially through the SIP route, could suffer. So Harshendu, how do we manage this challenge?
So to my mind, in a way, this is a factor of the environment in India, in that you get a lot of growth opportunities, but you also get a regulator that is viewing the industry from the consumer perspective, as they rightly should. And so they are encouraging certain models to come through. And we are in a very interconnected world. And so what you're seeing happen in India from that side is already happening in other parts of the world. In fact, in the Western world, what we see is it's gone one step ahead, where they have totally taken away, in most of the developed markets, the ability for the manufacturer to compensate the distributor at all. I don't think SEBI is thinking in those lines, frankly, from whatever discussions we've had. I think what you see with the regulator is they are firstly very well aware that the distribution community plays an important role in India. And if you see, as Sandeep was mentioning, this current regulator is more aware than anything else. So one of the first things the current regulator did is, when they came back, is they came up with the concept looking at B15 and came up with a very unique way, to my mind, from city number 16 onwards, getting entry load back in some form or the other. And so, while we may say entry load is gone, it's gone, it's gone, to my mind it's now only gone in the top 15 cities. It's not really gone beyond that.
Yeah.
And so I don't know necessarily when everybody feels, oh, SEBI is saying this, SEBI is saying that. I think the first thing that was done was one of these things, and suddenly it's back. And so if you look at it today, where the penetration, a lot of talk is there around B15 penetration, the fact remains that in some form or the other, the upfront commission remains in that location. So there's just one example. The second thing to look at in this is, again, balancing the needs of all stakeholders. I think to my mind, the kind of model we need to look at for India is the following. There's always this debate, should it be upfront plus trail or should it be all trail? And some people assume that, for a firm like ours encourages all trail. But actually the model I'm most in favor of is a trail weighted model. And I'll explain what that means. I think everybody gets that there are certain upfront costs which are there, and everybody who's getting into the business now will plan for what the models currently are, and will look at a certain portion of the money coming as upfront and a certain portion of money coming as trail. I think the regulatory nudge for us, which made us consider this whole change, came very strongly of the view that a upfront which is distorted or very high vis-a-vis the annuity component, and if the bulk of the compensation is in the transaction as opposed to the annuity, is where the misalignment takes place. And so I think the attempt which was made was to say, okay, there is a need for upfront, but can that upfront be at a level where it helps meet those acquisition costs, but the bulk of the compensation comes from the annuity, since that's the most aligning aspect of the compensation. And so, to me, in India, where if you have a trail weighted kind of model, I think it will benefit the industry over the long term. You talked about the fact that it happened all of a sudden. Some of these things are a product of the environment, it's part of the regulatory nudge. And I think in every aspect, regulations have been very quick and sudden. And we've been facing that. And by the way, I remind people that it's not only in the mutual fund industry, in every industry in India. Nimesh was making the point earlier, you're blessed to be in India, you're seeing growth across the board, across the economy, across all industry. But equally, it has come with a regulatory activism that is benefiting us. And so we call it reform, we call it evolution of the market. And part of that is that the regulation and the environment is changing at a very fast pace, and the best you can do is adjust to it. I don't think we can crib about it beyond a point, because a lot of times it's not for the industry to decide. By the way, the situation we are in the West, it has happened equally fast, but it has happened through an adjustment of market forces in countries like the US. And if you see Europe, it's happened totally through regulation. So you see both models existing in different parts. But the end result that is coming out of both these changes has been pretty similar, what you see. So whether it's business coming in the US, which was almost 80-90% front-end load driven, now comes through the advisory model, or what we've seen in Europe, which is the banning of commissions, has come in through that route, but that's regulatory driven. So in different countries, the approach is different. I think the current model, I would like to call it, is a more trail-weighted model. And I think, from my perspective, it's not ideal in that it's not a market-evolved model.
Yeah.
But eventually is a better model than what is frankly being considered in the West right now. And I think from an Indian environment perspective, it's a decent model.
It's a decent model. Excellent. Thanks. Very well put. When it comes to direct plans, I have myself not understood, whether there is a need for something like this 2 years down the road. One has not yet fully understood or appreciated. I take the example of pharma industry. How would it be if pharma industry were selling directly to consumers without any doctors or chemists involvement? and what could be the, so while we speak about and, dangers of mis-selling, are there dangers of misbuying? And I am aware of examples in Australian industry where life insurance was sold for 10 years directly, and today people have lost faith in life insurance itself, the product, because when they went for claims, the people were not aware of the fine print, they were not aware of exclusions, nobody gave them any service, nobody gave them premium reminders, and they said, "Ye product hi bekar hai, we don't want to do life insurance." So we have to, Nimesh, what is the, while it's a more than enough debated topic, but now that direct plan is there and a reality, and we know the regulator view on it, how can this become an opportunity for us in a way?
See, my take on that is that all the way AMCs are structured, and this I have been saying continuously since last 2 years, nothing new I have got. The way AMCs are structured, we are 700, 800 people across the country, right? 200 towns in India, and we are 700, 800 people. So there is no way, and out of that, if sales guys are 400 to 500 guys, there is no way that we can cover the country, right? We don't have the capability, neither we have capacitized ourselves for that. So our model has always been coming through the distributors. But is direct a reality? Direct is a reality. People will come online to us, it will happen. So again I'm saying market is infinite. The first statement that I made, unnecessarily we focus on some things. वो reality है अभी क्या कर सकते हैं उसका कुछ नहीं कर सकते. There is if 10% of the market is direct, there is 90% which is coming through distributors. Right. Let's focus on that. That 10% is there. It's a reality. So that's the way I look at business. I said in the first line also I said the same thing. That changes have happened. I have adapted the changes. I have moved on in life. Yeah. That's the way it is.
I guess. So I would probably changing gears. I think one of the challenges of this industry is reducing the cost. I think that all of us know, being in this industry for a long time, that cost of transaction has to keep coming down. And Nimesh, you alluded to that also. And technology is the only way cost can be reduced. And there are certain conflicts that come up. A thing like direct, what it does is it has probably made distributor community suspicious of an initiative like MF Utility. I was speaking to Ramesh this morning. Only 7,500 cans have been opened so far. This number could have been 75,000 had the adoption been fast. But because there is a suspicion in the mind of distribution community that ye kal ko B2C model ban jayega, whereas it won't remain B2B, and there is no assurance to the effect it won't be B2B, remain B2B. So that is why there is so it is not direct alone being there, but its implications indirectly on the growth of the industry. So Sandeep, you wanted to say something about it.
No, I think you mentioned on the word suspicion. I'll take it the other way around. I think we have to, as in a relationship like this, you have to understand you are far more stronger than many times what you think you are. Let me give you some data points. I think we're talking of this few basis point here or there, but the difference today between, if you were to look at the period of 15 years or 20 years, the top quartile funds and the bottom quartile funds, the difference is as high as 15%. On a 20% CAGR, that's the kind of difference. So I clearly believe, and I agree with Nimesh when he says there's a 90% of people who are coming, and your value will only keep increasing. If somebody was to get into a wrong fund and lose out money, he will automatically see you far more stronger. Now the point is, are we adding value? That's the bigger thing. So for me, I have always been very vocal on the fact that distributors, and I think for a minute, I think because of the regulation, we say the word distributors and advisors. If we were to not get into the legal language of that, all of you are advisors. Yeah. All advisors who have done a good job, I think the investor will keep coming back to you. Where is this question? Who wants to go direct? And I go back, and this is something I've quoted many times. I was once in Varanasi, and I opened the newspaper. There came a pink color, or you have this leaflet which fell down, and it was from a distributor which said 10-year mutual funds with 10-year, top 5 funds, 1 lakh has become so much, bottom 5, this much has become this much. You decide you want to say 50 paisa or you want to earn 5 lakh rupees. So I think it's your strength is much more than what you think of. We should get away from this suspicion, and you're not on a weak wicket, you're a very strong wicket. So actually it's the other way around. Investor needs you, but you have to realize that investor needs you. If you keep thinking that direct is going to take away my business, direct will. If you think you are going to add value to the investor, you will add value.
No, no, well put, well put.
Rajiv, can I just add to
Yes,
that?
please.
Just by the way, just a little global perspective on this. The ability to deal directly with mutual funds in countries like the US has existed for a very long time. So it's very easy at virtually no cost to trade into a mutual fund. But even in a market which is most penetrated in terms of mutual fund, very rarely are people doing that.
Yeah.
And to kind of underline Sandeep's point, this was seen during the TMT bubble. A lot of people gave up their jobs and said it's so easy to make money in markets, and they just broke the job, every day they were buying in the equity markets, and the whole conversation died once the crash took place. What happened at that time was when the advisors, people who were with through advisors, the advisors got the clients to keep them stay firm and remain invested in the market. By 2001, they were well up. Their money, which had gone from 100 to 10, was more, had gone back to getting their capital back. Whereas the people who panicked and got out, the people without advisors, never made that money again. And this whole conversation died at that point in time. So I think it just takes the next bear market for this conversation to be over once and for all. I think, yes, there are some people who may be self-directed, but as Nimesh pointed out, Sandeep pointed out, it's a small number. I think investing is a very complex business, and the proof of that is the number of people investing in mutual funds right now or in stock markets right now. That number is very low, and I think the debate has to move on to, from the existing number, how many will go into direct or otherwise, to how can we get the remaining people, which is to my mind a big number which is outside the fold, and I think that's a better conversation to have.
Right, absolutely, well said. Neeraj bhai, you have invested substantially in technology and reaching out to a larger constituency of investors. How do you believe, what is your vision that how can we leverage technology to reduce the cost and so that the combined bottom line of this industry goes up, which is AMCs and distributors combined? Because right now there is some tussle which keeps happening in profit sharing of the existing small pie. I think the thing is that the overall pie should grow, everybody should earn more. So, and technology is the only way to do it. So Neeraj bhai, your insights into this.
I think technology is a great enabler. Why you need application form? If you have a technology platform through which one can make an investment, there is a whole lot of cost of printing, cost of distributing. IFA has to take a form, has to go to the customer, get a signature. So many things takes place. Instead of that, if there is a technology, and now there are several multiple modes of payments. You've got payment gateways. Now because of NPC, there is a NSCH, that is one can become a clearing house, and one can do the debits from customer's account. So even in an SIP, like if you take our case, then if a customer is interested to say invest in Templeton, Reliance and ICICI schemes, you need 3 different mandates. But if you have a technology as a distributor, then just by virtue of one single mandate, any schemes one can invest, and you can even change from one scheme to another without changing the mandate. Secondly, there is because of technology, we have adopted the stock exchange platform, where we collect the funds on behalf of the customers and then allocate it to the funds. So here, even an inter-AMC switch is possible in our case without a financial transaction in the bank account of a customer. So from A fund, if a customer wants to redeem and wants to get into a B fund, that is possible by virtue of technology. So the life becomes simple. I'll just give you an example. One of our customer had gone to Malaysia and somehow his father had some medical emergency and he was supposed to admitted and he was in requirement of funds. So we have an application. Just by using that application, he was able to redeem his funds. And even the technology has happened at the AMC level and the RTA level. Today, in 24 hours, in a liquid fund, you get your money instantly. So on the next day, he received his money in his bank account and he was able to utilize
Fantastic.
it. So I think it has an extraordinary role to play, not only in terms of transactions, but also in terms of servicing a customer. Why you need to send physical account statements?
Yeah.
There are so many things, like one of the suggestions we had made to AMFI as an NJ, that we have to take a SDC, self-declaration certificate for the best practices for adhering the SEBI's code of conduct. And we have large IFS. So we said that why can't we take it on an eSDC mode? If I have to take 10,000 physical forms every year, that's, I mean, it's too much. So these are the ways in which one can probably use technology, and ultimately, if, as you rightly said, if the pie increases, then it's mutually beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. Prateek,
So Rajiv, I believe, this is really the last frontier. When you look at India on the technology disruption side, most of the other business models in India today, or not just India actually, all around the world, are seeing significant disruption on technology. Right now, I guess as distribution, we are only seeing some of the changes which are coming in through regulators or from competition within. But if I ask a question, how many people now actually go and physically visit a bank branch within this audience? I mean, when was the last time when somebody actually went there? Now, with the type of changes which are happening in the fintech world, I mean, I was just reading a US report which said already about $20 billion of investments are being done through robo-advisors. The world is going to change so dramatically, and it's not going to take a decade to happen. I mean, the earlier panel had somebody who was, on the angel funding side, who spoke about changes in all the other aspects and all the other industries. And the rapid change through that smartphone, we'll see that happen in the next 3 to 5 years. So I guess as an industry, even on the distribution side, we will need to be a lot more prepared for how do we keep ourselves abreast. And these are the changes which will actually not come within the financial industries. I see some of the largest telecom companies, for example, becoming large financial distributors going forward. There is the payment license, the payment bank licenses, the small bank licenses, many of these things which are going to roll out over the next 12 to 24 months. So as this pie grows, the opportunities for various players is just going to go and see, is exponentially going to go, you are going to see those type of changes. So I guess all of us will need to be actually prepared to see how do we use those opportunities, or as it has happened with Kodak or some of even the large companies, you would become extinct. So I mean, I would tend to agree with all the panel members here that as an industry, I guess, we'll have to take all those challenges and see what are the opportunities which come our way through technology. And I mean, NJ already showing the way in terms of how they are leveraging that right now.
Absolutely. So maybe, we are coming to an end of our time, but Nimesh, your final words, so to say that, this has been a very fruitful 25-year partnership. The training and development support we've got from, just 2 institutions, if I mention FT Academy, Reliance Edge, over the years. The partnership which we forged together on the SIP side, 2,000 crore a month book, totally consumer centric, all stakeholders are happy. I think we must reminisce the good things we've built together. And our future is lower cost of transaction technology. So Nimesh, what is the, in this, forging this strong and deep partnership, what is the one last, word you would like to say, what would take us forward?
I would like to give minimum negative experiences from if we are on the same side of the table. Basically, your customers should get minimum negative experiences, because whenever they do well, they have made a smart decision. Whenever the markets don't treat them well, they are going to blame us that we have not done a good job. That is because the pain of losing 5 rupees is much more than the joy of gaining 50 rupees. So I don't want to, as a brand, I have been very conscious that can we come up with more and more conservative products when we are selling to our customers. Can we, because a mutual fund can go and hit any customer, including my school teacher in Guwahati, can we create a range of products which limit the downside for the investor? That is what my whole, I think as a client, I don't want to give him a negative experience. If you all get into that and create a range of products, like in the West also what has happened is absolute return products are gaining a lot of momentum, that the client wants clarity what he'll get. While we cannot do that, can we create a range of products which will limit his downside? I think ultimately the guy is looking at 2% more than FD. Most of the 90% of the people are looking at getting something more than their FD. Can we create products which will give them something more than their FD? If we create a range of products in that, I think, and statistically also Indian markets are, if you do well, if you are able, rather than trying to capture every upside, if you limit the downside of a customer, you tend to do well. So that's my, this one, that to ensure that your customers don't get a negative experience, brand is made and business will happen.
Absolutely. So I think, I must thank all the panelists for great participation and all of you for staying totally awake, wide awake in this late night show. The keywords are partnership. It is our problem and we have to solve it together, bridging the trust and communication gap. And if I were to give my own, 25 years bit, I would say, I've been thinking long and hard in the last 24 hours. I would say that bridging the communication gap between the 4 or 5, like Sandeep you suggested, industry associations, AMFI and SEBI, and increasing the communication, but this is only an interim solution. Creating a robust SRO will take us forward. And this is something I said 10 years ago at an FPSB platform, that all of us in this business, we have a moral responsibility to give at least 10% of our time in volunteer work, in activism. So if we want improvement in our business, if we want solutions to our problems, we have to go out and do the service. We have to, working for your own industry association and then helping in creation and evolution of a strong, robust SRO. So I have, case studies. I was talking to somebody the other day about this SRO in Brazil. There are different models. It's called AMBIBA, which is mutual fund association promoted body, and there's already 5 years experience, but it is a distribution association under the aegis of mutual fund body. That is the model what SEBI has proposed for India also. And then there is a US model, which is FINRA, which is a distributor promoted SRO, and there are, so it is very important that as stakeholders in this business, we study the pros and cons of all models. We must write to the right people at right places and help evolve in the next 6 months to a year a very strong SRO where all the voices combine and we work together for the growth of the industry. After all, it's our shared vision. So thank you very much to all the panelists. Great opportunity. Thank you.
As we come to the end of this day, I'm a little overwhelmed. I started with this idea of doing this event about 3 months back. I really don't pretend to know the bank and the national distributor community too well, but they've been very generous. So it all started when I started getting inputs on what to do and what to discuss at the event and how to conduct it. So I'm very grateful to all the heads of all the banks and national distributors. And believe you me, that I did meet all the heads of all the banks and national distributors. Prateek would know, Rajiv would know, and Neeraj would know that, they'd testify. So my heartfelt thanks to all the banks and national distributors for supporting us in this particular cause. My thanks to all our sponsors, our platinum partners, L&T Mutual Fund, Reliance, our gold partner, Motilal Oswal, our silver partner, Franklin Templeton. Any event needs a lot of quality content. Finally, an event is built only around content. My grateful thanks to the 28 speakers who came and made these 9 sessions worthwhile for us. There were many other people who helped us conceive and put together this event, and one of them is Ajit. Ajit, I've always benefited, all of us at Cafe Mutual owe a lot to you. And in this particular event, I was there with you till day before figuring out things. So thank you, Ajit, for being with us. My thanks to Gurdeep for making the FI partnership possible. Thanks to our event managers, and thanks finally to all of you for being here with us and giving us this opportunity. Your support means a lot to us. And finally, if we've been able to contribute anything to your insights and knowledge, I would consider that to be the best outcome of this particular event. So thank you and good day. Bye-bye.